Tales of the Revolution, the Intolerable Acts. When King George III in Parliament passed the Coercive Acts, it was widely seen as a firm response to the mounting unrest in Boston. The Boston Tea Party had infuriated the king and had hardened a belief among many in England that it was necessary to make an example out of Boston. The response in the colonies was swift and strong. Only one word was necessary to describe their feelings: intolerable. Why were these laws intolerable? A feeling was becoming widespread that the king was trying to strong-arm the colonies into accepting a role as second-class citizens. Many colonists believed that they deserved the same rights as residents of England, including the right to representation in Parliament. The patriot rallying cry, "No taxation without representation," perfectly captured the central issue of dispute. The people of the colonies would not consent to taxes imposed by Parliament until their own representatives had a say in the passage of such laws. The Sons of Liberty's actions at the Boston Tea Party were rooted in a deep belief that the colonies had been wronged. Instead of working with the colonies to find a resolution to the crisis, the king and the Parliament demonstrated a determination to coerce the colony of Massachusetts into strict obedience. The harsh terms of these acts, the devastating effects they had on the lives of thousands of colonists, served to unite colonial leaders in the pursuit of justice. The first of these acts, the Boston Port Act, provided that until the lost tea had been paid for by the people of Boston, the city's harbor would be closed to both incoming and outgoing ships. This meant the end of trading and the devastation of Boston's economy. Bostonian merchants could not sell their goods in other markets, and Boston citizens could not get essential food and supplies to support their families. Even in the face of this harsh response, the people of Boston never paid for the lost tea. The second intolerable act, the Quartering Act of 1774, provided for the housing or quartering of British soldiers in the city of Boston and throughout the 13 colonies, until the city was freed by General Washington and the Continental Army. In March of 1776, Boston would be occupied by thousands of British soldiers. This was in effect similar to earlier versions of the Quartering Act, which was first passed in 1765. The third intolerable act, the Administration of Justice Act, didn't take long to earn its own nickname in the colonies, the Murder Act. Due to the increasingly hostile attitudes of the colonists, Parliament was concerned that the British officials would not receive fair trials in the colonies. The act allowed any British soldiers and officials who were charged with a crime in the colonies to avoid trial in the colonies by instead facing trial in England. Although the logic here is easy to understand from the British perspective, they're protecting their people from potentially biased jurors. The colonists came to loathe the law as an instrument of British corruption and abuses of power. With the knowledge that courts in England would be much more favorable to the British officers than a colonial judge or jury, many felt that the British would even get away with murder. The fourth intolerable act, the Massachusetts Government Act, represented perhaps the deepest insult to the city of Boston. It removed the power from the Massachusetts colonial government and instilled a military governor appointed directly by the king. This governor, General Thomas Gage, also served as a commander for all British forces in North America. This act was the ultimate symbol of tyranny in the eyes of the colonists. It was the immediate usurpation of power from a long-standing elected assembly in favor of military rule. Another act passed in 1774, the Quebec Act, is sometimes included in the descriptions of the Intolerable Act. Although passed separately from the other Intolerable Acts, the Quebec Act also served to increase resentment toward the Crown. Thomas Jefferson felt that it was of such significance that it warranted a mention in the Declaration of Independence, where it can be found in the section known as the Grievances Against the King. Colonial complaints related to the Quebec Act centered around two basic issues. First, the law provided freedom of religion to French Catholics living in the Quebec region. Second, it defined new borders and created a government for the Quebec province, effectively taking land that had been claimed by Massachusetts and other New England colonies. This was perceived as a punishment of New England in favor of Quebec. Cultural differences between the populations of Quebec and New England only exacerbated the reaction of the Quebec Act. The outrage over the Intolerable Acts led colonial leaders to organize a meeting to plot a response. In September of 1774, the Continental Congress met for the first time, affirming that the colonies were united in their belief that the King and Parliament had abused the rights of colonial citizens. John Hancock was named president, a role he would keep until the end of the war. 12 colonies were present, with only Georgia absent because of concerns that the British government would stop defending settlements from Native American attacks. The Congress decided to boycott British goods, to petition the King to repeal the Intolerable Acts, and to meet again in May of 1775 if the acts were not repealed. Tales of the Revolution, the Intolerable Acts. Questions for check for understanding. Number 1. What were the Intolerable Acts known as in Great Britain? A. The Intolerable Acts. B. The Unseemly Acts. C. The Coercive Acts. Or D. The Forceful Acts. Number 2. The Intolerable Acts were passed because of what event? A. The Boston Tea Party. B. The Coercive Acts. C. The Boston Massacre. Or D. The Battles of Lexington and Concord. Number 3. Which Intolerable Act took power away from the Massachusetts General Court? A. The Administration of Justice Act. B. The Massachusetts Government Act. C. The Boston Port Act. Or D. The Quartering Act. Number 4. Which Intolerable Act became known as the Murder Act in the colonies? A. The Administration of Justice Act. B. The Massachusetts Government Act. C. The Boston Port Act. Or D. The Quartering Act. Number 5. Which Intolerable Act was connected to the city of Boston paying for the damage from the Boston Tea Party? A. The Administration of Justice Act. B. The Massachusetts Government Act. C. The Boston Port Act. Or D. The Quartering Act. Tales of the Revolution, the Intolerable Acts. Open-ended discussion questions. Number 1. Why do you think Great Britain responded to the Boston Tea Party with these particular acts? What were their reasons for including each of the 4? Number 2. The Quebec Act caused further anger in the colonies. What were the primary reasons that the colonists disliked the Quebec Act? And number 3. Opinion. Which of the Intolerable Acts represented the harshest punishment for the Boston Tea Party? Support your answer. When you are done, you may turn it in.